Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
Gale Banks.
To call Gale Banks an engineer would be an understatement.
This is Speed School with Gale Banks.
School has begun.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Speed School. I'm Gale Banks, and this is Walt Ware. In our last episode, we kind of teased John Delorean and Smokey Eunuch. And there's a lot there, a lot to talk about. But Walt, before we get into those guys, I want to mention a guy named Vince Piggins and Hudson. I'll tie it all in a bow here real quick. Back in the early 50s, Vince Piggins was the racing engineer for Hudson Car Company. Along with him was a guy who fielded the cars, built the engines, did all of this stuff, named Smokey Eunuch. Smokey is famous for cheating.
Bending the rules. He would say bending the rules.
Okay. So I've got a Hudson story that Smokey told me. It turns out that C.J. Baker, who is the tech editor at Hot Rod Magazine, was getting married. And he asked me and Smokey and Herb and one other fellow whose name escapes me to stand up for him in his wedding. Smokey came over and hung around the shop, and you know, we went out to dinner to a Mexican place down in San Gabriel. At the time, the shop was in San Gabriel. And I asked him about the Hudson years, and he told me about cheating from the center line of the crankshaft out. Turns out, back in the early 50s, that you had to center the wrist pin in the piston. NASCAR would not allow offset wrist pins. Smokey's home track was Daytona. But it wasn't a super speedway.
No,
they raced on the beach.
They raced on the beach.
Yeah. And you'd run down the beach, come up on the highway, run the highway, then go back onto the beach. The turns were partially sand. So what he wanted to have is high torque when he was lugging down in the sand, and especially in those turns. And he wanted to offset the wrist pins, but it wasn't allowed, and it was easily found, on an engine teardown.
Oh, yeah.
He got some blocks from the Hudson Iron Foundry. I don't know if Hudson was complicit in this cheat or not, but he offset the center line of the crankshaft relative to the bores to get his offset wrist pin thing happening. He literally cheated from the center line of the crankshaft out. And he told me that story. I just looked at him and I went, the kids are right back in the shop. Before we left, and Smokey was all dressed in black that day and wearing a
cowboy hat,
black one.
Yeah.
As we were leaving the shop, one of the guys grabbed me and said, "Who's this preacher you've been?"
He looked like that.
Yeah, walking around here all day with. I said, "That's no preacher.
That's far from a preacher.
That's not even a man of God."
Sure. I can tell you more about
Smokey Eunuch. Anyhow, GM, specifically Chevrolet, picked up Piggins, and along with Vince came Smokey.
That's how he got there. Okay.
Yeah, that's how Smokey got to GM, and specifically Chevrolet. And that Vince Piggins, Smokey Eunuch thing went on for years.
Decades.
Let's start with John Delorean. John Delorean had been running Pontiac, and then he came over as general manager of Chevrolet.
That's correct.
And this is where you got involved.
Yes.
So let's take it from there.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
it's quite a story actually. But Chevrolet was not doing so well in the marketplace and all of that. And John had got this halo from the Pontiac GTO and putting Pontiac really on the map for a performance vehicle. So John decided he wanted to win Indianapolis 500 with a small block Chevy, which is...
And this is 71, 72 or
this
so.
Would be early
70s.
Yeah. The race event was actually the 72 500. That was the goal line, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And so we he went through all of the requirements for homologation and all that. And we might have touched on this, but to run a push rod stock block 2-valve per cylinder engine, you could run 209 cubic inches.
Yeah, and 209-inch small block Chevy. It's hard to make a small block Chevy that small. A lot of sleeving and de-stroking.
Smokey can do it.
Yeah. Very ingenious. C.J. Baker later on did a 3-volume set with Smokey on his career.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll have to get
And
that.
I've
You
got
have that?
I do.
Okay, that's not in my library. I have a lot of things, but that's not one.
DeLorean's running Chevy. Piggins is running the performance aspects.
Herb worked for Piggins.
So this is a Piggins, and Herb Fischel was working for Piggins at that time?
At that time. That's how I met Herb, actually.
Got it. And there was no love lost between those guys, between Herb and Vince.
Trust me, I know that.
Yeah.
I was in the middle of that for a while.
I know. Anyhow, so...
Piggins was hard to love, actually.
Yeah. But he kept me in a new Corvette all the way through the 83, just for me to screw around with turbocharging in the damn things. Of course, there is no 83 Corvette. The only one ever on the street was a blue car with manufacturer's plates that he gave me for that year.
Huh, I didn't know there was never an 83.
The 82, it went from C3 to C4 at that point, something like that. So here it is, early 70s. How did you get involved?
Well, we talked a little bit about how I ended up doing Caterpillar when I really wanted to do cars, right? So my boss, John Kazir.
So you're doing this behind Kazir's back? Is that what you're going to tell me?
No.
Yeah.
No. But I wasn't allowed to play with cars anymore, right?
Yeah.
But Smokey was breaking turbos on the dyno in Daytona.
Yes.
And he would call DeLorean.
Oh, look at that.
And of course...
That looks like a young Walt Ware there, guys. Yeah.
So
okay.
So anyway, he was breaking turbos right and left on the dyno, and then of course, all of the things he did with the air intake system was surcharging and choking and every other thing. So ultimately, he went to DeLorean via Piggins or directly.
Yeah.
And DeLorean would call Jack Teskey, the chairman of Garrett Corporation. I mean, the big billion-dollar company.
Yes.
And then Jack Teskey would call John Kazir, the president of the turbo business.
All right.
And one day I got a call from John Kazir. And he called me in his office and he closed the door. And I thought, I don't know, I'm either going to get fired or get a raise, right? And I wasn't expecting either one.
Yeah.
So, and he said, look, you have an assignment. And he says, this has nothing to do with your real job. And you can't really.
So you got to do your real job.
Yeah,
and this.
You got to do your real job. In fact, nobody should know you're doing this job. But your assignment is that I don't get one more call from the chairman of Garrett because John DeLorean called him because Smokey wasn't happy with our turbos.
Yeah.
So that's how I got sent to Daytona.
Yeah. Got it. What was going on? He had compressor surge, did you say? He
was breaking
shafts?
Power shafts.
Yeah.
He was burning up thrust bearings, on and on. I mean, he was destroying the turbos.
Yes.
Through all different kinds of things on the track and on the dyno.
He was learning.
He was on a learning curve.
About turbos is what he was doing.
Well, the TL4 was never intended to do what. I mean, it was a tractor turbo. It was made for farm tractors. That's how it started.
Yeah.
I mean, almost every farm tractor, 100 horsepower and up, had a TL4.
Right.
And it started out as a TL4, and then a TL4B was an upgrade, but it was still a farm tractor, diesel turbo.
Got it. So let's start with the turbine housing alloy.
Right. We went through, obviously, ductile NI-resist and stainless steel and all of that. But the big issue was when he was breaking things, just physically breaking them.
Is this your first visit with Smokey?
That was probably my first time down to Daytona.
Yeah, so that being the question, what did you discover when you got there?
Well,
was his intake system or what was...
Well, it was clear he was running the turbochargers all off the map under different
I got it.
throttling conditions.
So shaft speeds were really high.
In surging and choking, and
was he throttling the compressor?
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah.
I mean, with a butterfly.
Right. As I recall,
because a lot of the Indy guys throttled before the compressor early on.
And it doesn't like that.
It doesn't like it. And you want to talk about turbo lag. You don't throttle there.
Mm-mm.
You throttle after the compressor. In fact, when Cosworth moved the butterflies into the ram tubes, you stacked up the density again against the butterflies, and then pop, density goes right to the valve and into the combustion chamber. If you throttle before the compressor, the density after the throttle is pretty low on a drop throttle situation. Now you got ambient air that has to come in and get compressed in the compressor, increasing its density, and then fill the piping all the way to the valves with density. Then you get response. That's called turbo lag. A whole lot of early turbo lag, especially at Indy, is the throttle was in the wrong frickin' place. What was Smokey doing?
I don't recall exactly.
Yeah.
But what I had was a basket of broken turbos, right?
So you're how do you fail?
I had cadavers.
There's a art form called failure analysis for turbochargers, and guys who are really sharp would be blown away by what you got, I would imagine.
It didn't look like anything anybody ever seen before.
Yeah.
Right.
How the hell are you failing these things this way?
I mean, he was breaking everything, breaking the shaft, the coil shaft.
Yeah.
Then because of the way he was loading and unloading the compressor, he was just burning up thrust bearings.
Yes.
Right? And then the trims weren't all right on both ends for the performance,
So the pressure resident in the turbine housing versus the pressure resident in the compressor housing, if the pressure resident in the turbine housing is higher than in the compressor, it thrusts towards the compressor.
Yeah, it's reverse.
Conversely, if the pressure is higher in the compressor and low in the turbine, it thrusts towards the turbine.
But he was physically breaking them, not just wearing them out. I mean, they were broken.
He was breaking
He
the
was
thrust.
breaking physically. They were pieces. They weren't just.
What the hell?
I'm not kidding.
It's like hitting the shaft on the end, either end, with a hammer. Big freaking hammer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
Well, walk us through what you did to give Smokey a bulletproof turbo. I want to hear this.
Well, beyond the aerodynamics and thermodynamics of matching the compressor and the turbine for the power, that was that's fairly easy.
Yeah.
But that's
what was he running, like a V trim compressor?
I think we might have ended up at a V3. I think a V3 was. This is memory now. That's a long time ago.
I know.
This is a long time ago.
It's a long time ago for me too.
But you had some of them.
I had some of them.
We got all that working, the thermodynamics and aerodynamics, but it was the punishment that he was putting these things through. It was just destroying him, literally.
Was he breaking or melting either one of the wheels, compressor or turbine?
No.
We
got past. We had all kinds of material for aircraft, so that was not a problem.
Okay.
And we had very aircraft high temp turbos, so that was not a problem. We could solve the metallurgy.
Gotcha.
Okay, and we could solve the aerodynamics and the thermodynamics. The whole issue was the mechanical, structural integrity, if you want to call that, for a use for which it was never intended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was the real challenge, to make it bulletproof, basically. Let's make it Smokey-proof.
So now you get these turbos to Smokey.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Well, we got them, dialed in on the dyno as well as durable, and so then we started track testing.
Smokey's got the turbochargers.
And they work.
And they worked.
So that problem was solved, but getting the car to work.
So was this the side hack, that weird car that Smokey did?
No, this was a conventional.
A straight up conventional Indy car.
Number 30.
Let's see it. All right, that's a conventional kind of a wedge, almost a lotus-looking thing.
Right. It was a contemporary chassis.
Yeah.
It was pretty contemporary chassis.
But the capsule car is the one I'm thinking of.
That was much earlier.
Yeah.
Very much earlier.
How'd the car do?
The car qualified very well for Indy.
Yeah.
Because I slept there in the pit. We had a motel room, but it was no point.
Yeah.
And we qualified really well, even with Jerry Carl, who wasn't, a top-notch driver.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, Smokey wanted to take everything apart and tweak some things. So we stayed up all night until the morning, almost barely get ready to go back and really race, right?
Yeah.
And we did well for quite a few laps, but something came loose.
Okay.
And it wasn't the turbo.
Yeah.
It was not the turbo.
I'm with you.
And I kept, even like he was going to say, Smokey, we did really good, the thing's dialed, right?
Right. Yeah, don't screw with Mother Nature.
Kiss
it's
it or
ready
something.
to
Just
go.
kiss it and pat it on the butt, right?
Yeah.
No. He says, I still remember, he says, Walt, you're either on Broadway or in the So
That'd be Smokey.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
He might have used a different word, but anyway.
Well, yeah. And it was,
anyway, and I'm like, please, right?
Yeah.
It was the first really race for the car. Mm-hmm. So
was anybody?
I forget where we qualified. I think. Don't check me on this.
Okay.
I'm going to go back and back check it, but it might have been around 13 or something. That's not bad.
That's respectable.
That's not bad.
Guys win from 13
for an out of the box thing. Off the trailer.
Yeah.
But if you look at the car, the name of the car is Oriente Express.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't figure out who the heck the sponsor was, right? And so I asked one of the guys in the, the story about when Smokey was in Venezuela in the oil fields and all that.
Oh, yeah.
The Oriente Express is a hotel of ill repute.
Oh, no.
In Quito, Ecuador. That's where the name came from.
That's what he names his car.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out that's not like Lucas Oil or Pennzoil. You can't make it up.
No. Oh, my God.
He was a character.
So let's move to McLaren.
But let's take one more step with Smokey and DeLorean.
All
right. This is a career thing.
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So DeLorean, he got in trouble. He overdid himself at Chevrolet, right? And so he resigned or left, or he wanted to, then it ended up he wanted to build his own car, right?
Right.
The DeLorean.
Right.
There was kind of a void period in there. He got a Cadillac dealership, and he was named to the board of National NAM or something like that. He had some board job, right? So then he got into this thing of trying to make a DeLorean car. Well, we all know that he put in this
Peugeot
little V6. Of course, the car, it looked pretty slick, glowing doors and all stainless steel. And you go, I still go back to that, Back to the Future thing. The car was in there, right?
Yes.
And it was kind of hokey, but then it got a lot of press. Anyway, obviously the car didn't go all that good, right? So then DeLorean was talking to me about coming and being his chief engineer, so I could make at least the engine engineer, so he could make the car go better. So Smokey called me aside one day, and he says, Walt, he said, and he's not a management consultant, right? But he's a pretty damn smart guy. He says, Walt, he said, I got to tell you, I don't recommend you do that. That was the best advice I ever got from Smokey.
Yeah.
Before that, I was giving him advice, that probably saved my bacon. He'd have probably had me in some hotel room carrying a briefcase, and I'd have been in jail, right?
You'd have done the deal.
I would have been the guy that showed up with the bag, right?
Yeah.
I'd have been the bag man.
Oh, man.
Anyway, so that's the end of Smokey, and that's the end of DeLorean.
So, same time frame, McLaren was making the M8.
Yeah, they had
big
M8s.
Block Chevy, Lucas injection, big block Chevy.
Yeah, but the M8s were non-turboed.
I know.
They were very competitive until...
Then they went to the M20.
But they only built a handful of them.
Now, I understand the M20 was also sold naturally aspirated.
It started that way.
Yeah, and then they did the turbo program.
Right. What happened, the Porsche factory team with Penske, with their turbo 917s were just awesome.
Yes.
They were awesome till the end.
They were
right?
like 1,100 horsepower.
And they could do more. And so if you're going to win, you got to have the power, right? When they do it, when Porsche does it, they do it right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they know what they're doing.
Flat 12?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Opposed 12.
Yeah.
Weren't they water cooled though?
Oh, they were, I'm sure.
Yeah, not air cooled.
I can't say for certain, but
I can't.
Had to be.
Yeah, I'm pretty
I'd have
sure
to look it up.
Yeah.
But I have books this thick on Can-Am. So.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a fairly short thing for me too, because McLaren, they ran a turbo car a little while, and they had TE06s on it, and it wasn't. They just never made it really that competitive.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, Charlie Agapou and Commander, his sponsor, wanted to win Can-Am, and it was kind of an open thing. Mm-hmm. To beat Penske and Porsche, you had to have power. You had to have more than power, but so somehow I got called into that really late because it wasn't working with the TE06s. Right?
Yeah.
There were other problems.
Now, this was like a 494-inch big block Chevy. Yeah. Aluminum.
All aluminum. It was an experimental engine, basically. Mm-hmm. It was experimental with Chevy, too. So you got kind of you got an experimental engine, and then you're making it do something that probably was never intended to be twin turbocharged and operate at 1,500 horsepower. Okay.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't intended for that. So there were issues with the engine and
what experience did Chevrolet have with turbocharging at that point?
Or even all aluminum blocks.
All of the above.
All the above.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, this was
McLaren did in Detroit, or I think they were in Troy, Michigan. They did the initial twin turbo setup, the dyno work, etc.
They wrecked a car at Riverside. No, they wrecked a car at Atlanta, one of the M20s.
Yeah.
Commander almost committed, and they wanted to win, at least make a good show. So they hired.
Was McLaren running the car, an M20 turbo car, as a team car at any point?
Very short period of time. Very short. They built the car, and Commander bought the cars. They never got it really dialed in, but it's a package that dialed in would have been competitive, I'm pretty sure.
So what about Commander Motorhome?
See, they bought 3 cars. They bought 2 cars from McLaren that had this big block package.
With the turbos.
With the turbos.
Yep.
And then Andretti, then they went and contracted Andretti to drive when he was available, because he was under total career contract to Firestone.
I see.
That's another problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Andretti drove it.
He drove it when he was available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he didn't like the first 2 cars, so they did a whole new chassis for him.
So is this still an M20?
It was still an M20, but it had some different sheet. It was different. They made it the way he wanted it. I mean, he's a pretty darn good. He knows he's not just a driver. He's more than a driver.
Right.
So they built a car specifically for him. I think they drove it at Laguna, and then when it came to Riverside, and I was only involved for like 1 weekend at Riverside, and it still wasn't right. And I forget who called me, but anyway, I ended up going out there, and Pete Wiseman was there because he wasn't happy with the transmission either. It had a crash block transmission. You couldn't really shift it. You had to. It actually didn't have a neutral, from what I've read. I mean, it was a beast, and so
Wiseman also was doing the conventional IndyCar transmissions.
He did Formula 1
transaxles.
He did Formula 1 too. Yeah.
In fact, in the Streamliner, the Teague Welch Banks Streamliner, that car went 432 miles an hour with a IndyCar transaxle, a Wiseman.
So anyway, I go to Riverside in I don't know if in my Turbo Vega, and because it was all dusty out there, right? Because they rented the track just before the race, so I got to blow off the track in the Vega, blow all the dust off, right?
Yeah.
But then I did a baseline run with the TE06s, and I had instrumentation and all that, and I ended up in the car with Andretti because I had to read the gauges. And,
taking laps?
I had no seatbelt. I had no seat.
Imagine you.
I had no seat. Look at it. Well, you can see.
Show me the picture.
That's Andretti. See his helmet?
Yeah.
That's me.
Are you on his lap? I mean, what the hell's going on?
There's no seat, but I'm on the other side of the car.
I see your knees. Is that your knees?
That's my knees.
Oh, my God.
I am wedged in to all the chassis.
I wish this was a better picture.
that's the Wiseman picture he took. This is old stuff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. God. So you're logging data
in a car with more power than God.
Yeah.
And Andretti driving.
Yeah, that's an Andretti statement.
Yeah, and
it had more power than God.
So then I started switching out turbos because the whole thing was, I mean the T06 is down the back straight, and that's a long back straight. I mean, we were over 220. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But then the SEs, you had to do the turbo lag thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I was going through T04s with different trims and packages because I only got one shot, so I brought a box full.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I'll tell you, with those T04 SO1s in there and going through the SEs, you couldn't believe it. I mean, once I rode with him, I thought I'm never going to be a race car driver.
Did you start out though with 691s?
That's how McLaren started. So that's what they bought.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So you came down to T04 SO1
for the road race car. Yeah. I mean, it's not a Bonneville car. I
know. I've got it. Yeah.
And it was running really good. It was running so good. We had that car. John Cannon was there, and Mario was there, and they had the big motorhome, and everybody.
Right.
They were all in.
So all a West Coast operation, by the way.
Yeah. I'm doing all of whatever the mechanical. Well, they had mechanics, so I didn't have to do wrenches. Not that I'm averse to it. But and so then I would go ride with Andretti and make a change, right?
Right.
Cannon took one ride with it in the T04, and he got sick. He didn't want to drive it again. This is true. He went to the motorhome, and maybe he had something else wrong with him. But
it was John Cannon?
John Cannon.
Yeah.
He didn't drive anymore that day.
I had that problem with Roy Woods using the same turbochargers.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was 75. It's a Decon Monza, yellow car. Al Holbert captured the national championship in Trans Am. Yeah. And then Roy Woods bought it. By the way, Roy Woods was also nosing around this whole McLaren thing at the time. Roy bought the car from Holbert and had 358-inch Weber carbureted small block, making 585 horsepower, something like that. Very, very, very fast car. So I get a call from Roy, and he wants to do a turbo engine for it. We had the proper turbos by then, the SO1s. So we did a 5-liter turbo setup for it. And I think the first place we went with it, the G.I. Joe Grand Prix in Portland. Fairly long straightaway on that track. It was laying down, going lean, popping at the end of that straight. Mm-hmm. And everybody was blaming the turbo setup. It was about a 930 horsepower setup on 5-liter. Well, we went to his shop. It had 3 Holley fuel pumps. Call it the pump assembly. It's a cylindrical motor with a pump assembly on the bottom of it. And it says specifically in the instructions, of course, I had a speed shop as well, so I sold lots of these pumps.
So you knew the product. Yeah.
Well, the pumps were upside down. And if you put the pump head at the top, gasoline or whatever you were pumping would work its way down into the motor, and it would fail. Chuck was the guy's name who was the crew chief. I said, this isn't a turbo problem here.
Not if it's leaning out. It's a fuel problem.
Your pumps are upside down. Oh, so-and-so said so-and-so. I'm going, it's the age-old thing. If turbos weren't there before and you put them there, they're always the first thing people blame, the turbos. So I said, tell you what, I built a flow stand to measure with his pumps in the car what the flow rate was and compare it to the flow rate required on the dyno at 930 horsepower. It came down to this. I took one of the engines with their permission, put it in Geisler's 53 Studebaker, went to the salt and set a record at 217 miles an hour. Wow. Now, A 53 Studebaker looks slippery, but there's things wrong with them. And one of them was we were running a stock-bodied category, the gas class. You couldn't put spoilers on the tail. And
No arrow.
Studebakers, 53s, want to fly the tail. You get above about 205 or so, and they get real tail happy. And this car had spun 7 times.
But it stayed upright.
Yeah, but went through 6 drivers before we got a guy who'd stay in the car. But we tried to go faster, and we're on a run, probably approaching on the tack. It'd be 228, 230. And we were running those 18-inch Halibrands IndyCar wheels and used Indy tires.
On a lot heavier car.
Yeah, we ran 15-inch on the front, 18-inch wheels on the rear, Firestone rib racers on the front, and these IndyCar tires on the back. One of the mag wheels just fragged, so we were done for the week. That was the last time that driver drove that car as well. It really gave him palpitations, I guess. That became the fastest door slammer at Bonneville. That was like 78, 79, somewhere in there. And no door slammer ever went faster until we came with the big block Chevy with 2 TEO 691s on it, the big blowers, and a 68 Corvette, the Sundowner. And we went 240 with a Corvette. But let me finish the fuel pump story. Only 2 of the 3 pumps were hooked up. And I said it was Jerry Schwartz was the guy's name, Jerry. I said Chuck a while ago. It was Jerry. I said, Jerry, what's with the 3rd pump? These pumps aren't too reliable.
Oh.
So he can come into the pits and I can just swap the lines from the dead pump over to that pump on a fuel and tire stop. I said, dude, you want some Holley pump reliability?
Turn them right
180 of those pumps and do it correctly. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I could not believe it. That was a fast car. We took it up to Willow Springs. It was so much faster that it was out of brakes. The first thing it was out of was brakes. And they put Ferrari brakes on it, as I recall. Something that upgraded the brakes significantly. It had a big-ass spoiler in the front, chin spoiler setup. It was so fast in the straights that it broke and the car ran over it. Yeah. So we put a fresh one on and safety wired, did this elaborate safety wire strut system. And then the next thing that failed was that on those Monzas, they had a big, what's called the backlight, the back window.
Yeah.
And it blew
kind of upside down tub, right?
Well, kind of. It was just a big piece of plexiglass or Lexan in the race car. Blew that thing out. And I mean, it went vertically, probably 60, 70 feet in the air. Wow. And then it came down like a potato chip, I mean, that thing was fast. Got all that stuff fixed. And then I started turning up the manifold pressure. And Roy would go faster. I'd turn it up some more. And I got to a point where I turned it up, and Roy ran the same lap times. He comes back in. I'm going, Roy, what's up? Well, it's got a lot of power. Yeah. I ran out of Roy. I didn't run out of engine. Yeah. So have we completed the 70s here? What else happened in the 70s?
Relative to cars, which I wasn't supposed to be doing.
Right.
I was still responsible for Caterpillar Worldwide.
What was your title at AiResearch at that point?
At one point, I was senior account engineer, but I ultimately ended up being the general manager, but just for Caterpillar, right? Because I had everything, pricing and costing, and I mean, I was basically the Caterpillar general manager.
So when did you go to England?
That was in 1983, early 1983.
Okay. So one thing with your TEO 691 turbos. We've done a lot of boat racing here at Banks through the decades. In fact, the first forced induction system I ever did was in 1960 on a nailhead Buick marine engine for Big Bear, which is like, 7,000 feet altitude, something like that, 6,000, 7,000. But soon, that was 1960, so we didn't get to turbochargers till late 60s. We did our first turbo marine engine. We prototyped in 69. One thing we did do in the 70s was we built a boat. We were running a drag boat, naturally aspirated, injected fuel Hemi called the Crucifier. And I kind of went against Keith Black with this one, both of us running Chryslers. And we managed to win the national championship with the boat in APBA and DBA, two different organizations. That boat was quick. But the same year, we were running a project called Hurry Round Hondo, which was a jet drive boat, circle boat, obviously a Hondo boat. And I was running, much like the Can-Am engines, I was running an injected big block Chevy on methanol with two of the TEO 691. So you can get away without charge air cooling on methanol engines up to a point. And we had all the power we needed. We killed the jet drive. The first jet drive lasted like a mile and a quarter. We really, really drove away from everybody and then killed the jet drive. Same turbochargers as the Offies.
They flow a lot of air.
Yeah. How did Hurry Round Hondo do? It whipped everything. If it didn't break or kill the jet drive, we won the race.
Gale, you mentioned the water meth, and one of the things that is pretty interesting with that, you may well know.
Well, I mentioned methanol. I didn't mention water meth yet.
Okay.
But you got something on water meth. Let's hear it.
Well, we did that on the Vega, but
Did we do the Vega? Well, hey, wait a minute.
That was in 72. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Vega.
Okay.
Yeah. I've forgotten all about the Vega. So what's the backstory on the Vega anyway?
Well,
how did you end up owning a Vega?
Well, my Vega backstory is that we had our first child, and he came home from Huntington Beach Memorial Hospital in my 69 427 Corvette.
Yeah.
And I had to get a different car for Jelana, so I ended up going to a wrecking yard and buying a 72 Vega. Before it was wrecked, it needed a motor, right? And you and I pulled the motor, and we sent it out, and we had cast iron sleeves. So anyway, I needed a daily driver. When I first got it, it was smoking so bad that I would only drive after dark because I was afraid I was going to get a ticket and go to jail, right? And I didn't get on the freeway.
Damn near a junkyard Vega.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, we cast iron sleeved it. We went to 6.5 to 1. We had a TO4B SO1 on it.
Right.
We ran 60 pounds of boost.
Oh, you left out. We put a marine intercooler on it.
It's not charge air.
Well, since I started in the marine turbocharging, we were using seawater or lake water.
Oh, that's
to cool the heat exchanger.
Yeah,
that's what we did in the Vega. We used a single element Banks marine charger cooler, and then had a second radiator and a pump
and water meth.
And water meth on top of that, yeah. And 6-to-1 compression ratio.
And 60 pounds of boost.
Yes.
And I don't know if you remember, but it's not maybe your favorite solution, but I found a inline carburetor, some European thing. It might have been a big, giant SU.
Yeah.
It matched the inlet to the inducer to the impeller. It was straight flow.
Yes,
and then,
straight through it.
And then I had a bell mouth to bring the flow.
You know what?
That's a test.
Did you find this out back, or did you have it at home?
Did you find it? You found it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he found that.
Yeah. So this was to measure mass airflow back in the day, prior to electronics. And Walt actually gave me this. I'm looking for,
It says AiResearch on it, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, it says the Garrett Corporation, AiResearch Industrial Division. That was on Aviation Boulevard.
Right, before Lomita.
This, somebody bent the lip. We'll have to have the fab guys iron that out.
But I had something like that perfectly matched to the carb. There was a straight bore. It was line bored all the way to the inducer, the impeller.
Yes.
Straight flow.
Yeah.
It was.
So it was like a side draft, a big side draft carburetor.
Yeah, big, giant side draft.
Yeah.
And I forget, I had all kinds of jets. I still have a toolbox with all that.
Where did you get that carburetor?
It was off some European high-performance car. But I wanted it just...
But it was a single barrel.
Yeah, it was just one.
Yeah.
The thing had, remember?
That turbocharger had a carbon face seal in the compressor. So you could do draw-through carburetor with that, which is what you did. Tell me about the Vegas performance.
Well, remember we had the aircraft dual needle gauge where we measured in
inches of mercury, manifold
in the
pressure.
manifold and inches of mercury in the exhaust.
Yeah.
Do you remember how that thing would cross over?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that thing would almost cross over at idle.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And speaking of Herb Fischel, at his retirement party, his 40 years at GM, and I was invited and went back to it.
Yeah.
I was actually at his first wedding, too. He stood up and he's making his speech, and he says, there's a guy out there in the audience.
Yeah.
And he said, I came out to California, and he and I we might have gone to Falconers and a bunch of places.
Sure.
And he said he took me for a ride from Tony's Fish Market on the pier, and he said, it's the wildest ride I've ever been in any car in my whole life.
And that's
Vega.
In the Econobox Vega.
I mean, it was like a junk box, right?
Those cars, this is weird. They were made around shipping the car with a nose down. The car shipped vertically. The battery, everything would go along with that gag.
Like a meat thing,
Yeah.
right? Like a meat rack.
They could get more of them on one rail car doing that. It's an economy car designed to ship economically. Everything about it was cheap.
The other thing about that car is just a side note, but the thing, it shook so bad, the vibration of the engine itself. Because, I mean, it literally ate alternators. I mean, I had to put an alternator on there like every 6 months or something.
Oh, my
It would just
God.
just shake the bearings out of it. you know? It was just...
Due to the turbo or?
due to the
design?
unbalance of the engine, the
Yeah.
four-cylinder unbalanced. It was
Terrible.
It wasn't. That was a really shaky engine.
I'll be damned.
It didn't have any counterbalance shafts.
I never owned one, so
It was cheap.
Let's take your career now into the 80s. You started in January 1st of 69, and you were at Garrett until the end of 89. That's a good career. When did you go? You came in, you became the Caterpillar guy. You spent a lot of time in Peoria.
That's right.
Over a couple of years, increasing the business for Garrett AiResearch with Caterpillar. You became the guy worldwide, I guess, with Caterpillar.
Worldwide. Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you went to England. What year did that happen?
In 1978,
Yeah.
I was promoted to basically be the general manager of all the diesel turbo business. They still wouldn't give me cars.
But worldwide.
Yeah, North America, in this case.
Okay.
But it was everybody: John Deere, Mack Truck, Detroit Diesel.
So you had them all.
I had them all now.
Yeah.
I never got rid of Caterpillar, but I had them all.
Who were your competitors? Switzer for
Primarily
one.
Switzer in that day. Cummins had their own Holset turbos.
Right.
But the only thing they didn't have for their big KV series was like RT18A90, which is a monster.
a big ass turbocharger.
It's a monster.
Yeah.
And
How did you get to England?
okay, It wasn't by choice.
I know they needed you there, but how did you get there?
I mean, the situation is that there was some corporate issues in America.
Yeah.
And it was a big problem in England.
Yeah.
And my business was running very well in America. And they had the company in England for 13 years, and it had really never made a profit.
13 years, no profit.
Or almost.
There's
no
nowhere
profit.
to go but up.
I mean, like 1 or 2%.
You go, yeah.
Like, I mean, it wasn't worth being in the business.
Exactly.
Right?
So,
besides that, the customers were all unhappy because of the quality of the product.
So who were you selling turbochargers to?
Everybody in Europe. We were sole sourced to Volvo, Scania, Saab, VW. We were 2/3 of their business. Mercedes, BMW,
wow,
Fiat, Iveco, everybody.
Yes.
DAF,
Yeah.
MAN, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we were number one in the world.
Where was the plant in England?
It was a place called Skelmersdale,
Yeah.
which would be an industrial park. But basically, they had built like 15-story housing units for poor people. And the idea was to give American companies a big tax break to come build a factory and employ those people.
Got it.
That's the storyline.
All
So
right.
the corporation got a whole lot of money to build a new factory in England, and they hired a guy, a managing director from a British manufacturing company out of the metal bashing area of England.
Yeah.
And it had never worked, right? And
What was the prime business in that area?
there was different manufacturing units
Okay.
of different. They encouraged a lot of companies to come there.
Yeah.
So they were.
Was it close to shipping or?
Well, it was very near Manchester, but actually it was between Liverpool and Manchester, but much closer to Liverpool. And
Got
there's a
it.
huge unemployment area in Liverpool.
So how did those folks become unemployed? They were shipping out of Liverpool. I mean, it's a seaport.
Oh no, let me tell you about Liverpool then. Okay, this is the backstory. All right.
Yeah.
Liverpool in 1955 had I need to verify this, but 20 miles of docks.
Yes.
And there were still ships at sea, like Long Beach, waiting to come in. Okay? And then came the technology of containerized ships.
Yes.
And the unions in England are very strong. And they have the Dock Workers Union.
Yes.
In fact, a guy who was like a vice president of Garrett's father was head of customs in Liverpool. He was a British guy.
Yeah.
He probably came there from Rolls-Royce, because remember, we recruited a lot of guys from Rolls-Royce.
Yes.
Jet engine business.
Yes.
And his name was John Falcon. Okay. But I mean, like you said,
There was just one union in Liverpool?
dock workers in this case.
Yeah.
Like this was the dock. So when they wanted to bring in containerized ship, there was a situation before they were containerized. It was an understanding that the dock workers got like a 20% off the top. In other words, they took stuff that came on the ships and sold it.
Oh my God.
They're stealing, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. But it was understood. So when they wanted to containerize them and they were secured locks, they went on strike.
Oh my God. Of course they did.
No, total. I mean, they shut down.
Yeah.
They shut it
No
down.
more baksheesh.
This is in the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay, in the middle 50s, late 50s.
Whoa. Talk about mobbed up.
Okay, so I mean, the Liverpudlians are a toughened bunch.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you know what happens at their soccer games, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my work crew. They went on a huge strike, and then the government, when they promised them that they would never lose their jobs, even if they were containerized, they need less people. They don't unload.
Oh, yeah.
As a whole, and they even guaranteed their children would have a job. In other words, they were going to phase it. They would have bring in the technology.
My God.
Well, that's the government socialist solution, right? So they were not going to lose their jobs, but they were going to have to work, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, it ended up, the ships were containerized, and these people didn't really want to work.
Do you think Liverpool workers are lazier than...
They are damn lazy. Damn lazy.
What makes you say that?
Oh, strikes for the 1 minute to say and they're out, aren't they?
Has your husband ever been out on strike?
Yes, and I was disgusted with him.
One of the things I was told before I went there, I was told at the corporate level, that, Walt, whatever you do, don't have a strike, because the corporation top people hate unions, And if you have a strike, that could be into your career. And I'm like,
Oh my God.
So I'm supposed to go fix something, but I can't work on it, right?
Yeah.
So, but that was a warning I got. I had a couple of warnings of what I couldn't do. But the British government was trying to create jobs near Liverpool. So
And
they
you guys bought into that program.
Yeah, they gave a big incentive
Yep.
to do that. And they actually built this, what do you call the housing where there's like just people crammed on top of people up 14, 15 stories? I mean, what do they call it? Like it's not a slum. These were brand new buildings, but it's like
Projects.
that. Yeah, project. It'd be a project.
People call it
It'd be a project. And in Kirkby, another little place, was another little industrial site. AC Spark Plugs had a plant there.
Yeah.
And it was one of the few Americans over there running businesses in England, because they want you to hire British managers too.
Yeah.
So you have to go through a whole process. I was vetted like I don't know, to get there. I mean, they had to prove that I was the only guy that could do it, and there was nobody in England that could do it.
Oh yeah, I get that.
I mean,
I get that.
So I went through all this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're running at 1% to 2% profit. You could easily
barely break it even.
You could easily go negative and start losing money.
My instructions from John: you have 2 assignments. One, you got to tell me if the place is salvageable or
Right.
shut it down.
Right.
And if you tell me you think you can make it work, then you have to tell me how long will it take, how much will it cost, and how good can it be.
Right.
Okay, that was my assignment. That was my whole assignment.
Yeah.
Right?
To your knowledge, is it still there?
It's gone now. Everything. Garrett's gone. There's nothing in Alameda anymore.
Oh, sorry.
190th Street, where I came
Yeah.
when I hired in aerospace, it's got green fences now.
They've got a European owner.
The Turbo people, yeah,
The Turbo
they're
people.
Swiss,
Yeah.
and they
Swiss.
filed for bankruptcy about a year and a half ago.
Uh-huh.
A $2 billion business, and they filed for bankruptcy
Wow.
with huge global demand. How do you do that?
I don't know.
Well, you do it like you do it in England, right? You go.
So you're there. You've got these laid off, if you will, Liverpool dock workers.
Now
That's one union you've got in your plant.
I had 3 unions.
You had 3 unions in the same plant?
I had the electrical workers, because now we have a factory, right?
Right.
These were ex-dock workers.
Yeah.
So we have like the machinists, we have the electrical, and I forget what the third one was.
Yeah.
So, but they were, and then we're in Lancashire County, where the coal mining are.
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, this is when Margaret Thatcher was prime minister.
Yeah.
And she was squeezing the coal unions, right?
Yes.
So then
Yes, she was.
there was also a printers union in the town nearby. And so these people all have sympathy with each other.
Of course they
So
do.
if the coal miners go on strike, then all of my machinists and electricians and everybody else, they want to go on strike with them, right?
Oh, man.
And anyway, it was a wonderful learning experience, right? I've had a lot of wonderful learning experiences. And so anyway,
So you've got
so the essence of, we had 600 employees.
Yeah.
I had 3 buildings with 600 people that basically, kind of my oversimplified perspective was, the union bosses got up every morning and came to work to see how they could take advantage of the managing director. The managing director came to work every morning to see how he could win with them.
Yeah.
And so I think they spent most of their time doing that, right?
Yeah. Just jockeying for position.
Yeah. And so then every time he'd have to come back, because he had to submit an annual plan too, right? And
So what was your manufacturing quality like when you got there? You've got a manufacturing facility with 3 different unions, literally on the manufacturing floor, so to speak. I was buying turbochargers from one of Garrett's competitors, a 2-word name that manufactures turbos up till now. But I was buying rotating groups and doing my own turbine housing and compressor cover designs for a very popular diesel turbo kit I was doing. The warranty on that stuff out of England was mind-bogglingly.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Right. Well,
I ended up going to Japan working with Mitsubishi, it took me like 2 years to perfect that relationship with Mitsubishi. And then we went over to them, and I had like 0 problems, warranty problems.
Well, you're a great straight man, because besides the unions,
Yep.
which you need the workers to want to put the quality in.
Sure.
Okay. And so, as soon as I got there, it's just a matter. I mean, I met everybody. They actually the Liverpudlians are quite. What would you say? They have a strong sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
And they also are very prosaic or poetic.
Yeah.
I don't like they
In their speech pattern.
and they write poems.
Yes.
So the day that I almost got there, and I went down with the HR manager and everybody else, I go down to the cafeteria, and there's a poem on the wall. I wish I'd have had a camera in those days. I can't remember what it says, but it kind of like says, Walter Ware from far away has come here today to basically shut the plant down.
Was there a picture of you?
I don't know if there was
Walter
or not.
Ware has come today from far away.
To shut the factory.
Yeah.
I swear. And so the HR guy, he was Welsh, right? He was a cool guy, and he says, "Oh, that's just the Liverpudlian thing, right?" Well, it wasn't, but it was a
He's
union.
laughing
Right?
it off.
Yeah. Anyway, no, he was a really good guy. He was. Well, it was another thing John Kazir told me. He said, "Well, he didn't tell me very much, except I could either shut it down or fix it. And
Yeah.
if I fixed it. If I wanted to fix it, I better have a really good plan, right?" Yeah.
So what was your first objective?
To decide to close the plant or keep it open.
Well,
My objective was,
what was wrong with the product?
well, let me tell you the way I do things. So as soon as I got there and I, was introduced, I got on planes and I went to every customer
Yeah.
because I wanted to hear their story. Because I said, look, basically, hey, I'm the new kid in town, and I've been sent here to, make things work good. And so then they would tell me all the things that were not working good.
The customers would.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how you find out, right? No, I went there first.
I remember you telling me a story about Volkswagen. Is that the guy?
That's one of the guys, but he was the main guy.
Yeah.
So I went there with
Were they your biggest customer over there?
We were 2/3 of their production.
Yeah.
And they had 1/3 KKK, but there's a reason why they wanted 2/3 from Garrett. But so I go there with Jürgen Schultz, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And so he was German, local, because we always had local sales guys that.
What was his position?
He was our Garrett sales, and he worked for the corporation, not me.
Yeah.
So they report back to the corporation, and they tell the corporation if your division's not doing good.
So he takes you in?
To see Dr. Bush, right?
Dr. Bush is the chief
head
engineer?
of procurement for the whole VW thing. Wolfsburg.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, I've been to Wolfsburg.
Yeah, Wolfsburg. So we go in there, and then Jürgen and Bush, they talk for a while in German, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't speak German. So I'm there. I wished I did, but I didn't. And so they're going back and forth. And finally, Bush turns to me and he says, Mr. Ware, because they pronounce a W like a V.
Yes.
Because it's the first time I ever heard my name pronounced Ware, and I thought, I'm looking around the room. Right?
Yeah, who the hell is that guy?
Who is that guy, right? Is he behind me? Anyway, so he says, I presume you know why you're here. And I said, well, my understanding is from, management that I'm here to, make the business work better.
Yeah.
And, and the reason I'm here to see you is I want to know, what we got right and what we don't have right. And he says, let me tell you why you're here. He says, I sent a letter to your chairman and I had the other guy fired. No, nobody ever told me that, right?
Oh, my God.
So he said, that's why you're here. And then he says, and you have 100 days to fix it.
Wow.
I swear.
Wow.
I swear.
100 days.
You couldn't write a book like this, right?
Yeah.
And so he says, I want to show you what's going on in our factory. And they had the big wire baskets like you put, hard metal parts in.
Sure.
They were turbochargers, how they moved them around the plant, And so he had like stacks of them. And he says, see these? They're no good. I'm sending them back to you. Okay. Nobody told me this crap,
Like hundreds of them?
Hundreds, baskets and baskets. Yeah. So I'm thinking, oh, that was deep immersion, right?
Yeah.
I think I know what the problem is,
Yeah.
right? He just told me, right?
Yeah, you've got
I'm
a quality
100
problem.
days, anyway. So anyway, I went there, and I went to other places. The other places they were more, not quite so severe, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
They said what they weren't happy about.
What the problems were.
They weren't happy about. But anyway, he told me flat out why I was there and how long I had to fix it.
Yeah. And that he got your predecessor fired.
Yeah, that's what he told me flat out. And so I never had that's a new experience. So then I go back. So I needed to hear the customer because I needed their point of view. I mean, because nobody briefed me, right? Nobody briefed me.
Right.
I was there a little while and I ran into people, and some people would say, "You must have done something really wrong to get sent here."
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, English people would say that to me. Some of the management people at the company,
Yeah.
"You must have done something really wrong." I guess I did. But so then I just started meeting with the workers. I mean, I met with the management team.
Yeah.
And so then I start meeting with the work groups, and I mean one-on-one, face-to-face with the real workers, including the union guys. And I said, "Gee, we got this problem, and we're going to be out of business, right, if we can't fix this. And so I need to know, what can I do to help you?
Yeah.
Why we have all these problems?" And one of the things they told me that really, this is more corporate life, but they said, "Mr. Ware, when your company started this company here, in Skelmersdale, your manufacturing people sent us all of your old, used, worn-out machines, and they must have bought new machines there, and these machines are they're out of control.
Yeah.
They don't." And so then I go out and
they can't hold tolerance.
They can't hold tolerance. So
Yeah.
then I go out and they have like this row of like 15 or 20 people with different kind of hand-working benches, and they're doing hand repairs to they're like, over there they call it fettling metal. They have like little burr grinders, and they're doing all these things to try to make the parts acceptable.
Wow.
I mean, there's 15 or 20 people doing this.
Yeah.
They're taking the part off the machine tool and doing handwork on it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so, okay, I get it. I can see what's coming off the machine, and I see what you're doing.
Right.
This dog won't hunt, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, we gotta rebuild these machines, but in the meantime, we got to work overtime. And then I want to take one machine out of the time and totally remanufacture it,
Right.
recondition it
Right.
like new. And so then the millwrights, and they belong to the union, they said, "Well, we want to do it here. We got our shop." And I said, "No, I'm sending these back to the factory. I mean, I'm sending them back to the machine tool factory.
Right.
I mean, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And it was no reflection on them. It's
Right.
just
I get it.
It just we had to do it. So it didn't make those guys happy, but we went through that, and it was not a short process.
But you had 100 days.
Yeah, I had a whole 100 days.
So did you?
I don't know about the 100-day thing, but we got better and better.
Yeah.
Because we paid more and more and more attention. And the employees weren't bad. The union guys are always, they're bullies, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have to prove they're tough guys.
Yeah.
And so, but they didn't know how to.
Sounds like Putin.
They didn't know how to take.
Russian people aren't bad, but
Yeah, the same thing. Everywhere in the world, even China people aren't bad. It's the Communist Party, right?
yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
The union didn't know quite how to take me, right? Because they figured I was there to shut it down, and I had that option.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really worked with the people and the management, of course. And the management had their complaints, too, about why they weren't able to do their jobs better, right?
Yeah. Did your family finally come over?
In about 6 months or something like that, I forgot, yeah.
So you guys were apart for 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was hard.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. So I'm living in hotels and whatever,
Well,
And,
I understand ultimately.
So it's kind of like Caterpillar. It was like a repeat play, right?
Yeah.
This is another episode, right?
Go fix the business relationship.
Yeah.
In this case, you're fixing the manufacturing plant.
Yeah. But it was always about manufacturing, as it turns out. It was always.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always about manufacturing.
When we do engine assembly here for the Army on the JLTV, vehicle. The initial quality of the parts that come into our engine assembly facility has to be correct.
Exactly. You got to go all the way back.
Yeah, so if you've got people outside, you've got to manage them. And they have to be correct, and they have to be clean. There's a procedure you go through called PPAP, and it has to do with the quality of the parts. And there's various levels of PPAP. We tend to be around what's called L3. A lot of the vendors in the United States, the guys that do foundry, guys that do machine work, etc., aren't real good with this stuff.
They don't have they don't have process control?
Well, they have it, but they maybe not consistently.
I mean, it's on paper.
We have a secondary level of inspection, and that is the guys who are doing the sub-assemblies, the guys who take those sub-assemblies and or parts and install them on the engine. Those guys are all doing visual inspection.
They're inspectors.
Yeah.
Do they have gauges and fixtures?
So we have 2 levels of inspection.
So inefficient, but you have to do it.
But we have a really good record. We're nearing 20,000 of those engines now. Did you guys in England have any outside sources?
We did, of course.
Yeah.
And we ended up with our own foundry in Ireland to make our turbocharger parts.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we had a turbocharger casting and
to get consistent casting quality.
Right. So we had control of that, and
wow,
that seemed to work pretty good.
Yeah.
We got a big incentive to do that too, and turns out that the chairman was Irish and happened to graduate.
So it turns out you got better castings as a result.
Well, we had control, at least internal, as a supply.
Got it.
We weren't buying that out.
Yeah.
So we already had our standards because we had the foundry in America. And that was a turnkey start from. They didn't ship any old stuff from.
So you're into this a few years, and I understand you got a similar call to come back to the United States very quickly.
That's true. Well, just a little bit. So I ended up working very closely with all the employees and with the union, and because I lived, the factory was between where I lived and Manchester Airport.
Yeah.
So I would, if I'd come in at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I would come on a second shift and walk through the plant.
Right.
They've never seen a managing director in the plant, probably after 2:30. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd walk into union meetings. They'd be having a meeting up in the like where they have a meeting room, and I'd walk in and just sit and listen. And they didn't know what the heck to do with me. Right? They didn't want to. They didn't think they
That's
should.
the guy that's running the place. He's here in the middle of
I
the
just
night.
want to see if they had any problem. I'm just here to help, right?
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sincere about it. We got all those machines, all our machines redone, and we turned the place around. We got awards. We got the Queen's Award for export in 1984.
Really?
85% of our product was exported out of England.
Yeah.
There's not many big automotive factories in England.
In
anymore.
England, yeah.
So, but no, 85%. The Prince, whatever, came there and gave us some crystal thing, right?
So, total success in England.
It was going really good.
Yeah.
I had 2 strikes in the meantime, okay, because the union, they were totally on principle, and they were not, I wasn't trying to take anything away from them.
Right.
Those were really scary days because I watched them all walk out of the building. I'm sitting in my office. I watched them all go in their car and leave, right?
Yeah.
And Bill, my HR guy, and I'd talk to other guys, the guys with the AC Sparkplug plant, because they had the same people.
So they went on strike too.
And so when they told me, they said, look, Walt, if you don't get those people back here in less than 2 weeks, they go on the dole.
Right.
And then
now
they will
motivated.
never come back.
Right.
They'll just go on, social support. So here I am. They're all gone out of the plant. And it was over principle. I mean, I couldn't give up, right? I couldn't, I forget it, but it was a violation of principle. It wasn't, I'm trying to get them to work harder or do better or anything like that. I can't remember the detail. Anyway, so then they came back, but before 2 weeks was up. Well, I guess they were testing me, but the guy I replaced, the guy that Airbush had fired, was now retired in a village called Formby, like 25 miles away.
Yeah.
He called headquarters and told them I had a strike. I never told him I had a strike.
I'll be damned.
I get a call from headquarters. Walt, it's come to our attention that you have a strike at the plant. And I said, well, yeah, but they're all coming back. and he did. But that was like, I thought I was done that day.
Yeah.
I thought I was done. I couldn't give in, though. I couldn't. I'd have been worthless, right?
Right.
I mean, I couldn't have done my job.
But you came.
They came back.
Yeah.
And then I did another thing where I wanted to go, like, because we had so much demand now, and we were building a new plant in France at the same time. To support just more capacity.
Right.
And the Germans.
Did you go to France and
back and forth, and we fed them. We brought them online, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but they got all new equipment this time. They didn't start with rejects from Bill Doles, the guy. He was the manufacturer. I know what he did, this son of a gun. He sent all the old stuff and got new stuff.
And he got new stuff.
Yeah. It was true. It was true. The guys, I mean, we went through, I mean, we had team meetings, and we put up charts about, we had a goal, and we'd see, you know, we had a line and how many we make a day.
Right.
And it ended up, and I made some videos. I interviewed people. I had them in videos. I got them totally involved, right? And so they were like competing with. Now it became like a sport, like who was beating the red line better than the other.
Yeah.
I mean, because they had that kind of like, they had like the football soccer spirit, right? So then, as soon as it became competitive among them, I mean, it was
problem solved.
And we gave awards and stuff, you know. But then I wanted to go to a 4-4 shift, and I had an open day, and I invited all the family, all the kids. I had hot dogs. I had a helicopter come. I had all the equipment. I had Caterpillar. I had Volvo. I had a Bentley Turbo Mulsanne there.
Yeah.
So everybody could come and see what their mom or dad did.
Yeah.
The night before the open day, because it was on a Saturday, and the union decided they were going to boycott me.
Oh.
So the management came to me like end of the day Friday and said, Walt, they all came in my office and said, Walt, we got some bad news. The word's out that they're going to boycott your open day. Nobody's coming. I'm like, I wanted to cry, right?
Yeah.
I said, nah, they're going to come.
Yeah.
And it was a lonely night.
No.
And I got there really early and I waited for the first car to come. But they all came. They did. You know, they did.
Yeah.
And anyway, but the rumor was, so Walt's trying to get our wives here, so because he wants to do this 4-4 plan, and he's going to convince them that they should convince us to do the 4-4 plan. You know, so they'd work 4 days, they have 4 days off.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, but it didn't like, if they hit on soccer Saturday, they didn't want to, they wanted to, there were all kinds of issues.
So were you guys running 7 days a week?
We had ran 3 shifts. We never got to 7 days a week.
Gotcha.
But I was trying to make it better for them too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
anyway.
turbo demand was building in Europe.
Crazy. We were building a whole new factory in France.
Bring us back to headquarters.
So things are going really good. My kids are all in school. My 2 daughters did their first school in England.
Ah.
And Lance did junior high because he was, 7 years older.
Yes.
So my baby girls, their first school was in England.
Yeah.
You know, for family, it's the best thing we ever had, environment.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I still work like I do, but nobody was like rattling my cage all the time.
Right.
Right. And it was kind of like the corporate seagull thing. They would fly in, but they're exhausted. So they'd come in, you take them lunch and get them some wine, and they fall asleep, and they forget to ask you questions, right? And they fly back, right? It's this corporate seagull thing, you know that saying. They fly in, they eat all your food, they drink your wine, they shit all over the place, and they fly home.
Yeah, corporate seagull.
Corporate seagull.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
It's like that. If they're really bad, they call you there. See,
Yeah.
Mr. Ware, we want to see you here.
Yeah.
That's not a fun trip. But so things were good, and family-wise too. I mean, it was the most stable, like calm, cool. We lived in a little village, right?
Yeah.
No traffic. It was just nice. And they all got integrated. My mom, Donna, knew all the moms and all that, And there was one guy from AC Spark Plugs. We became buds, and he had a couple of kids like we had kids, and we had a 4th of July party in England, which was in
You're celebrating Independence Day,
the revolution.
Yes.
We're celebrating the revolution.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it was all good. And so then we had this plant going in France, brand new, turnkey. We built it in an area called Year of War history guy, in Théon La Vosges, which is the forests
Yeah.
where we fought to the
Yes.
ground.
Yes.
There's thousands of Americans that are buried there.
Yes, I know.
And so the one thing, it was smart because the French people loved Americans there because we went and died for them, right?
Right.
I mean, so it was good from that environment. It actually was an old furniture factory. We bought the building, but we totally redid it. This is all working, and we're supporting getting France going and this and that. So now we're dealing. We got the quality working really good now, and we're making the customers happy, right? There's always room for improvement, but we're getting better and better, and we're starting up this plant in France. I'm going to head to Manchester to get to Paris. This is on I think a Thursday.
Yeah.
I get a phone call on my cell phone in the car. It's freezing, ice over in Manchester, and I'm driving to Manchester Airport. And she says, Walter, you're to call John Kazir at 12 o'clock today, no matter where in the world you are.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, I said, I'm on the interstate or between Manchester and England. She said, well, you need to call John, right?
Yeah.
The damn car broke a drive shaft. I had to walk to a farm, and they're great people there. A really nice guy. He had a Range Rover and everything. So he drove me to the airport. I got there. I went to the phone booth and I made it.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hello, John. I understand I'm supposed to call you." And he said, "Yes, yeah." He said, "We want you to come back to England, and you're gonna run all of North America, basically." And I said,
Come back from England? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, "That's very interesting." I said, I'd like to think about that.
Yeah.
And I said, things are really going here, and they're going good, and they're going to get better. And, I was trying to, I wanted to stay. My family wanted to stay.
Yeah.
We were settled, and we'd settled in, and everybody was very settled in. And I said, and he says, like you said, Walter, you're not listening. He said, the guy who's in the chair is not going to be in the chair on Monday, and I don't want an empty chair.
Oh, my God.
So I went all the way to France. But how am I going to call
Was the
July?
guy that was in the chair?
That was the guy that tried to get me fired.
Got it.
So it took him.
His plan did not work.
Well, that's
I take it
when
as-
I came back. You can't believe how much damage can be done in 2 years.
Yeah.
Or you just can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But so anyway, I'm on the way to France, and I'm thinking, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. It's not what my family wants to do. But I either do it or I go find another job, right? It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm not going to do it. You can't.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm all the way there, and I didn't want to call Jelana. I really didn't want to call her because she was happy as a clam, and we
I'll
all
bet.
were. I don't exactly remember how I told her because I didn't want to do it. Anyway, I was back in L.A. on Monday.
You made it.
Sitting in the chair, looking out the window from the inside this time instead of from the outside.
So how long did it take Jelana and the kids?
About 6 months. She didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
But this was early. This was like both times it was like early, like February or something.
Yeah.
So and they all got
They finished school.
They all got sick. I had to leave, and they all ended up sick, really sick.
Yeah.
And poor she's there by herself with 3 kids, and it's terrible. Okay. So anyway, and it wasn't good for me either because, we were really close. She was half of me, right?
So
yes. So I left her. I left her again. So not by choice.
Not by choice, but now you're running.
Now I have a
Garrett North
much
America.
bigger mess than England because
Yeah.
it was a mess. The guy, Hugo Weich, the president of Europe, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going back to America. He would probably be glad to get rid of me, right? But he ain't gonna have anybody else to do it like I did. And so he came to me one day. He says, "Well," because he would go back there all the time. He was like a roundabout guy. He didn't have I don't know what he did. He said, "You realize what you're going back to?" And I wasn't paying any attention to America then.
Yeah.
I was totally consumed with my own problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You have any idea what you're going back to? They're going out of business back there." And I'm like, "Oh, good, right?"
I want to hear about the mess. And then we're going to celebrate all the cool stuff we did together in the 80s,
Very cool.
including Buick.
Yeah, that's the big one. That was a fun one.
So see you for the next episode of the Gale and Walt show.
Be sure to subscribe for more episodes of Speed School with Gale Banks.